The morning mist clung to Eagle's Peak like a shroud, as Dr. Sarah Chen carefully navigated the rocky trail, one hand instinctively protecting her 6-month belly. She'd hiked this mountain dozens of times during her years as a field archaeologist, but today felt different, urgent, like the mountain itself was calling to her. Then she saw it, a barely visible opening in the cliff face, expertly camouflaged with brush and rock. Her trained eye recognized the deliberate concealment immediately. Inside the hidden cave, her flashlight beam fell across something that made her blood run cold. Dozens of wooden crates marked with Nazi insignia, and beside them files bearing her grandfather's name. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the first document. Her grandfather, the war hero she'd idolized her entire life, stared back at her from a photograph alongside SS officers. The implications crashed over her like an avalanche. Her family's fortune, her research funding, her entire life, all built on blood money. Now she faced an impossible choice: expose the truth and destroy everything she'd worked for, or stay silent and become complicit in covering up war crimes. But what happens when the people who hid this secret realize someone has found it? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. Sarah steadied herself against the cave wall, her archaeologist's mind warring with her granddaughter's heart. The photographs scattered at her feet told a story she'd never imagined. Her beloved grandfather, Chen Ming, the man who'd supposedly helped Allied forces during World War II, standing proudly beside Nazi officers in what appeared to be this very cave. The documents were meticulously preserved in waterproof containers. As she rifled through them with growing horror, a pattern emerged. Her grandfather hadn't been a resistance fighter, as family legend claimed. He'd been a facilitator, helping Nazi officials smuggle stolen artifacts and gold through remote mountain passages to safety at war's end. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her husband David. "How's the hike? Baby behaving?" She stared at the screen, unable to formulate a response. How could she tell him that everything they'd built together, their research foundation, their comfortable life, even the trust fund waiting for their unborn daughter, was tainted by Nazi gold? The cave stretched deeper than she'd initially realized. Compelled by professional curiosity and personal dread, she ventured further inside. More crates lined the walls, some open to reveal glinting gold bars and priceless artifacts clearly looted from European museums and private collections. Ancient Greek pottery sat beside Renaissance paintings, their provenance cards still attached in Germanic script. But it was the modern additions that truly terrified her. Recent documents in protective sleeves bore letterheads from the U.S. Department of Defense and the National Archaeological Foundation, her own organization's parent body. The conspiracy wasn't just historical, it was ongoing. Someone had been using this cave as recently as last month. Sarah photographed everything, her hands shaking as she documented each crate, each document, each damning piece of evidence. The baby kicked again, more insistently, as if warning her to leave. She paused, one hand on her belly, considering the life growing inside her. What kind of world was she bringing her daughter into? What kind of legacy would she leave? A sound from outside made her freeze. Footsteps on gravel, careful and deliberate. Someone was approaching the cave. Sarah killed her flashlight and pressed herself against the cave wall, heart pounding. Through the camouflaged entrance, she could hear muffled voices, 2 men, maybe 3. They were speaking quietly, but their words carried in the still mountain air. "She's been gone too long," one voice said. "We should have intervened earlier. The Chen family has been useful," another replied. "But if she's found what I think she's found..." Sarah's blood turned to ice. They knew who she was. They'd been watching her. "What about the baby?" the first voice asked. "Collateral damage. Too much is at stake now." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting panic. These weren't random hikers or park rangers. They knew about the cave, about her family's connection to it, about her pregnancy. How long had they been monitoring her? How deep did this conspiracy go? The voices grew closer. Sarah realized with growing terror that the cave had only one exit, the same entrance where the men were now positioned. She was trapped, pregnant and alone, with evidence that could apparently get her killed. Her phone showed no signal bars. The baby kicked frantically, as if sharing her mother's fear. Sarah looked around desperately, searching for another way out or somewhere to hide. In the deeper recesses of the cave, her flashlight had revealed what might be a secondary passage. The footsteps stopped just outside the cave entrance. In the sudden silence, Sarah could hear her own ragged breathing and the thunder of her heartbeat. She had seconds to decide, try to escape deeper into the cave system or attempt to bluff her way past the men who clearly meant her harm. The choice was made for her when a beam of light pierced the cave entrance. Sarah's hands trembled as she photographed the bone fragments scattered across the cave floor. Each flash of her camera illuminated more details that made her stomach churn. Not from morning sickness this time, but from a growing dread that crept up her spine like ice water. The femur she'd first noticed wasn't alone. Ribs, vertebrae, and what appeared to be a shattered skull lay partially buried beneath decades of sediment and debris. But these weren't ancient remains. The synthetic fabric clinging to some of the bones, the metal zipper still intact on what had once been a jacket, and the unmistakable gleam of a digital watch told her these people had died recently. Within the last few decades, certainly. She knelt carefully, her 6-month belly making the movement awkward, and used a small brush from her field kit to clear dirt from around the watch. The face was cracked but still legible, a Casio model she recognized from the late 1980s. Her father would have been in his prime then, leading expeditions across 3 continents, his reputation as one of the world's foremost archaeologists already cemented. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. Deeper in the cavern, her flashlight beam caught something else, a metal briefcase, its silver surface tarnished but still intact. Sarah approached it slowly, every instinct screaming that she should leave, should back out of this cave and pretend she'd never found it. But the same curiosity that had driven her to follow in her father's footsteps compelled her forward. The briefcase wasn't locked. Inside, wrapped in deteriorating plastic, were dozens of photographs and documents. Sarah lifted them carefully, her archaeologist's training taking over despite her mounting horror. The photos showed archaeological sites she didn't recognize. Ancient ruins, excavation work, artifacts being carefully catalogued and packed. But something was wrong with the scenes. The workers weren't wearing the usual academic expedition gear. Instead, they wore military fatigues, and the vehicles in the background bore government license plates. A photograph slipped from the stack and landed face up on the cave floor. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It showed her father, 20 years younger but unmistakably him, standing beside what appeared to be ancient tablets covered in cuneiform script. Behind him, 3 people knelt with their hands bound, their faces turned toward the camera in expressions of pure terror. She recognized one of them, Dr. Elena Vasquez, a brilliant linguist who had supposedly died in a climbing accident during one of her father's expeditions. The pieces fell together with sickening clarity, the expedition members who had died over the years, always in tragic accidents, always when they were working on the most sensitive discoveries. Her father hadn't been unlucky with team members. He'd been cleaning house. Sarah's phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from David. "How's the hike? Remember to stay hydrated. Love you both." The normalcy of the message felt surreal against the horror surrounding her. She touched her belly protectively, feeling the baby's gentle movements beneath her palm. Another document caught her eye, a list of names under the heading Active Assets. Her father's name topped the list, but others followed. Government officials, museum directors, even journalists. An entire network dedicated to controlling what the public learned about their own history. The cave suddenly felt like a tomb. Sarah scrambled to pack everything back into the briefcase, her movements clumsy with panic. She had to get out, had to think, had to decide what to do with information that could destroy not just her father's legacy, but potentially her own family's safety. The afternoon sun felt harsh after the cave's darkness, but Sarah welcomed its warmth. She had a choice to make, and not much time to make it. The cold stone pressed against Sarah's palm as she steadied herself, her headlamp casting dancing shadows across the cave walls. The silence felt oppressive, broken only by the sound of her own breathing echoing in the confined space. She should leave. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, climb back through that narrow opening, and pretend she'd never found this place. But the leather-bound journal in her other hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She forced herself to take slow, measured breaths. The baby kicked gently, as if sensing her distress, and she placed a protective hand over her belly. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "Mommy just needs to figure this out." The beam of her headlamp swept across the cave again, revealing details she'd missed in her initial shock. This wasn't a natural formation, at least not entirely. Someone had worked these walls, carved deliberate grooves and alcoves. The space was larger than she'd first thought, extending back into shadows her light couldn't penetrate. Sarah opened the journal again, her hands trembling slightly as she flipped through pages filled with her grandfather's familiar handwriting. Most entries were routine archaeological notes, but scattered throughout were passages that made her stomach clench. June 15, 1952, the senator arrived today with his men. They've made their position clear. The site must be sealed permanently. All evidence destroyed. I've tried to explain the historical significance, but they're not interested in history, only in keeping secrets buried. June 18, 1952, Morrison says if I don't cooperate, my family will suffer. Sarah's father is only 10 years old. What choice do I have? Her father. Sarah's breath caught as she realized her grandfather had faced the same impossible choice she was confronting now, family or truth. He'd chosen family and apparently lived with the weight of that decision for the rest of his life. July 2nd, 1952, the cave is sealed. Official records show the excavation found nothing of significance. I've kept one journal, hidden where even Morrison can't find it. Perhaps someday, when it's safe, the truth can emerge. July 15th, 1952. The indigenous artifacts we found prove their presence here centuries before European contact. But more damaging to certain political careers is what we found beneath, evidence of the systematic destruction of their settlements in the 1800s. Land grants built on lies and murder, fortunes built on genocide. No wonder they want this buried. Sarah's mind raced. Land grants from the 1800s were the foundation of many prominent families' wealth in this region. If those grants were proven fraudulent, obtained through the deliberate destruction of legitimate indigenous settlements, the legal and financial ramifications would be staggering. She thought about the senator mentioned in her grandfather's notes. The timeline fit with Senator William Hartley, whose family had been a political dynasty for generations. His great-grandson currently served as the state's attorney general, and rumors suggested he had his eye on the governor's mansion. A sound from outside the cave made her freeze, footsteps crunching on dried leaves, too heavy and deliberate to be an animal. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she quickly switched off her headlamp, plunging the cave into absolute darkness. "Dr. Chen?" a man's voice called from somewhere above. "We know you're down there." Sarah pressed herself against the cave wall, clutching the journal to her chest. How had they found her so quickly? She'd told no one about today's hike, hadn't posted anything on social media, hadn't even informed the Park Service of her planned route. The fact that they already knew she'd found something told her everything she needed to know about their intentions. These weren't park rangers or concerned hikers. They were the same forces her grandfather had faced 60 years ago, still protecting the same secrets. Sarah carefully felt her way deeper into the cave, one hand trailing along the wall for guidance. Her grandfather's journal mentioned the cave extended further back, if she could find another way out, or at least somewhere to hide until they left. "Dr. Chen, think about your baby," the voice called, and ice flooded her veins. "You're what, 6 months along? 7? This kind of stress can't be good for the pregnancy." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. They knew about her condition, which meant they'd been watching her for longer than just today. Sarah's mind catalogued the past few weeks, searching for signs she'd missed. The same car parked near her office building multiple days, phone calls that ended when she answered, that feeling of being watched during her evening walks. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if weighing in on the decision. The drive back to town felt like an eternity. Sarah's hands trembled against the steering wheel as she navigated the winding mountain road, her mind racing faster than her accelerating heartbeat. Every few minutes she glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see black SUVs pursuing her, though the road remained empty except for the occasional deer crossing. The photograph burned against her chest where she'd tucked it inside her jacket. Dr. Marcus Whitmore, her grandfather, standing alongside men whose faces she recognized from history textbooks, and one she recognized from current news broadcasts. Senator James Kellerman, now chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, looked decades younger, but unmistakably the same in the faded image. Her phone buzzed against the passenger seat, David calling again. She'd ignored his previous 3 calls, unsure how to explain what she'd discovered without sounding completely unhinged. How do you tell your husband that his wife, 7 months pregnant and supposedly on a relaxing hike, had stumbled into what appeared to be a decades-old government cover-up involving her dead grandfather? As she pulled into their driveway, Sarah noticed the unfamiliar sedan parked across the street. Dark windows, government plates barely visible in the fading light. Her blood turned to ice. They were already watching. She grabbed her backpack and hurried inside, forcing herself to appear calm despite the panic clawing at her throat. The house felt different somehow, as if the very air had shifted in her absence. David appeared in the hallway, relief flooding his features when he saw her. "Thank God you're home. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer your phone." He moved to embrace her, but stopped when he noticed her expression. "Sarah, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of his words wasn't lost on her. She had seen a ghost, her grandfather's carefully buried past rising from the depths of that hidden cave like a spectre seeking vengeance. "I need to show you something," she whispered, glancing toward the front windows. "But not here. Someone's watching the house." David's eyebrows shot up. "Watching our house? Sarah, what happened out there?" She pulled him into their bedroom, the furthest room from the street, and drew the curtains. With shaking hands, she extracted the photograph and documents from her jacket. David's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a growing alarm as she recounted her discovery. "This is impossible," he murmured, studying the photograph under their bedside lamp. "Your grandfather was a respected archaeologist. He consulted for the Smithsonian, for God's sake. There has to be some explanation. Look at the date on these documents, David. Look at what they're discussing." Sarah spread the papers across their bed like tarot cards predicting doom. Project Blackwood, human experimentation, cover-ups involving missing persons reports from 3 different states. The baby kicked sharply against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. She placed a protective hand over her belly, the weight of her situation settling like lead in her stomach. Whatever her grandfather had been involved in, it was still active, still dangerous. The sedan outside proved that. David stood abruptly, pacing to the window despite her warning. "We need to call someone. The FBI, maybe, or..." A sound from the front of the house made them both freeze. The soft click of their front door opening, despite the fact that Sarah had locked it behind her. David's face went white as footsteps echoed down their hallway, measured, professional, and definitely not belonging to any neighbor who might have a spare key. "The bathroom," Sarah whispered, grabbing the documents and shoving them back into her jacket. "There's a window." They moved silently down the hall, but the footsteps were faster. A man in a dark suit appeared at the far end of the hallway, his hand moving inside his jacket with practiced efficiency. Behind him, Sarah caught a glimpse of at least 2 others. "Dr. Sarah Whitmore." The man's voice was calm, almost polite. "We need to have a conversation." David stepped protectively in front of his wife. "Who are you? What are you doing in our home?" The man smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "My name is Agent Morrison, and your wife has something that belongs to the United States government, something that was never meant to see daylight." The standoff stretched between them like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean and eerily quiet. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, the coffee growing cold in her hands as she stared at the photograph spread before her, like tarot cards predicting a dark future. Each image told part of a story she wasn't sure she wanted to complete. The symbols carved into the cave wall weren't random. After hours of cross-referencing her grandfather's journals and archaeological databases, she de-identified them as markers used by a secret society that had operated during World War II. But these weren't just any symbols, they were specific to Operation Bernhard, a Nazi counterfeiting operation that had been largely destroyed at the war's end. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus coffee later? "Need to discuss the Morrison site findings." She hesitated, then typed back, "Rain check? Not feeling well." It wasn't entirely a lie. The baby seemed restless today, turning and kicking as if sensing her distress. She placed a protective hand over her belly, wondering what kind of world she was bringing this child into. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent her career digging up the past, but now the past was digging its way into her future. The doorbell rang, making her jump. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in a dark suit, official-looking and stern. Sarah's heart hammered as she opened the door, keeping the chain latched. "Dr. Chen?" "I'm Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI." The woman held up her credentials. "I'd like to speak with you about your recent hiking activities." Sarah's mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, what? May I come in? This concerns a matter of national security." With trembling fingers, Sarah unlatched the chain. Agent Torres entered, her sharp eyes taking in everything, the photographs on the table, the open journals, Sarah's obvious pregnancy. "You've been busy," Torres observed, moving toward the kitchen table. "Mind if I take a look?" "Actually, I do mind. Those are private research materials." Torres turned, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Dr. Chen, yesterday afternoon, satellite imagery detected unusual activity in the restricted area near Devil's Backbone Trail. The same area where your vehicle was GPS tracked. You were tracking me." Sarah felt the walls closing in. "My grandfather was a respected archaeologist. He fought against the Nazis, not with them. I'm not suggesting he fought with them." Torres set down the photograph and faced her. "I'm suggesting he helped them disappear. The Chen family has been well compensated over the decades. Your grandfather's sudden wealth, his ability to fund expeditions, your parents' comfortable lifestyle, your own education and career opportunities, all built on blood money." Sarah felt nauseous, though whether from the pregnancy or the revelations she couldn't tell. "What do you want from me?" "The complete contents of that cave, Dr. Chen. Every document, every artifact, every piece of evidence. There are still people alive who profited from Operation Sanctuary, and there are families still searching for their stolen heritage. And if I refuse," Torres's expression hardened, "then you become an accessory to war crimes. Is that really the legacy you want for your child?" Sarah looked at the photographs scattered across her table, each one a piece of her family's carefully constructed lie. Outside, the sun was shining, but inside her kitchen, everything had gone dark. She thought about her unborn child, about the weight of inherited sins, about the terrible mathematics of justice delayed. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have 24 hours, Torres replied, heading for the door. "Choose carefully, Dr. Chen. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah spread the photographs across her kitchen table like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Each image told part of a story she desperately didn't want to believe. The skeletal remains, the corroded military equipment, the dog tags bearing names she'd seen carved into the town's war memorial. Everything pointed to an impossible conclusion. Her laptop screen glowed beside the photos, displaying her grandfather's archived field notes from 1943. Dr. Edmund Reeves had been meticulous in his documentation, recording every artifact, every soil sample, every cultural layer with scientific precision. But now, reading between the lines of his careful prose, Sarah detected something else: deliberate omissions, gaps where there should have been comprehensive data. She traced her finger across a particular entry dated September 15, 1943. Excavation suspended due to military exercise in Sector 7. The next entry wasn't until October 20th, over a month later, and resumed work in an entirely different area of the dig site. Sector 7 was never mentioned again. The cave lay in what would have been Sector 7. Sarah's phone buzzed against the table. Marcus again. She'd been ignoring his calls for the past hour, unable to face explaining what she'd found. How could she tell him that his grandfather, the war hero whose bronze statue stood in the town square, might have been involved in covering up the deaths of fellow soldiers? The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs that made her gasp. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the firm outline of tiny feet through her skin. 2008 weeks along. In 12 more weeks, this child would be born into a world where the Reeves name might be synonymous with betrayal and complicity. A soft knock at her front door made her freeze. Through the frosted glass, she could make out a tall silhouette that definitely wasn't Marcus. Sarah quickly gathered the photographs, stuffing them into her grandfather's journal before closing it. She slipped the laptop shut and shoved everything into the drawer of her kitchen island. "Dr. Reeves?" The voice was unfamiliar, authoritative. "My name is Agent David Chen with the Department of Interior. I'd like to speak with you about your recent work in the wilderness area." Sarah's blood turned to ice water. How could they possibly know about the cave? She hadn't told anyone except Marcus, and even then she'd been vague about the details. She moved quietly to the side window, peering through the blinds. A black sedan sat in her driveway behind her own car, effectively blocking her in. "Dr. Reeves, I know you're home. Your vehicle is here, and we really do need to talk." With trembling hands, Sarah smoothed her hair and checked that the drawer was fully closed. She opened the front door, keeping the security chain latched, and peered through the gap. Agent Chen appeared to be in his 40s, wearing a crisp navy suit despite the late hour. His badge looked authentic, though Sarah had no way to verify it. Behind him stood a woman in similar attire, her hand resting casually near her jacket. "I'm sorry, but it's rather late," Sarah said, proud that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Perhaps you could come back tomorrow?" "I'm afraid this can't wait." Chen's smile was polite, but didn't reach his eyes. "We've received reports of unauthorized excavation activity in protected federal lands. As the primary researcher with permits for that area, we need to discuss your recent findings. I haven't filed any reports yet. My work is still in preliminary stages." "Yes, we're aware of that, which is why we're here." The woman stepped forward slightly. "Dr. Reeves, we really would prefer to have this conversation inside." The implied threat wasn't lost on Sarah. She glanced past them at the street, hoping to see neighbors, dog walkers, anyone who might witness whatever was about to happen. The street was empty, pools of yellow light from street lamps creating islands in the darkness. "Do you have a warrant?" she asked. Agent Chen's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "We're not here to search your home, Dr. Reeves. We're here to discuss a matter of national security. Your cooperation would be greatly appreciated." National security. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Whatever her grandfather had helped cover up, whatever those soldiers had died for, it was significant enough that the government was still actively protecting it 78 years later. The baby moved again, and Sarah made her decision. She couldn't run, not in her condition, not with the car blocked in, but she also couldn't let them intimidate her into surrendering what she'd found. Too many people had already died for this secret. "I'll need to see additional identification," she said firmly, "and I'll be calling the local police to verify your credentials before we discuss anything." Agent Chen's jaw tightened. "Dr. Reeves, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation." "I understand perfectly." Sarah began to close the door, "which is exactly why everything will be done by the book." The secure phone buzzed 3 times before Senator Harrison's gravelly voice answered. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the hotel bathroom, the ceramic tiles cold against her back as she clutched the encrypted device Marcus had given her. "Dr. Chen, I wondered when you'd call." His tone carried the weight of inevitability, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for years. "You know why I'm calling." Sarah's voice barely rose above a whisper, though Marcus was supposedly standing guard outside the bathroom door. "The cave, the documents, my grandfather." A long pause stretched between them, filled only by the senator's measured breathing. When he finally spoke, his words carried decades of buried guilt. "Your grandfather was a good man caught in an impossible situation. We all were. Good men don't cover up massacres. Good men sometimes have to make choices that haunt them forever." Harrison's voice hardened. "Do you have any idea what was happening in 1953? The Cold War was heating up. One wrong move, one scandal involving military contractors and government oversight could have destabilized our entire defense infrastructure." Sarah's free hand instinctively moved to her belly, where her daughter stirred restlessly. The irony wasn't lost on her, discussing the protection of future generations while carrying one of her own. "So you buried it, all of it. The workers, the families, the truth. We contained a situation that could have compromised national security during one of the most dangerous periods in American history." Harrison paused. "Your grandfather understood that. He helped us understand the geological implications, helped us ensure the site would remain stable and hidden. The families deserved to know what happened to their loved ones. The families deserved to live in a country that remained free and secure." Harrison's voice took on the practiced cadence of a career politician. "Sometimes, individual tragedy must be weighed against collective survival." Through the thin bathroom door, Sarah could hear Marcus pacing. They'd agreed on a 15-minute conversation maximum before the risk of trace became too high. She was already at 12 minutes. "What do you want from me, Senator?" "The same thing I wanted from your grandfather, and later from your father. Discretion, understanding, partnership." The last word carried particular weight. The site is protected now, has been for decades. The families of the workers were quietly compensated through various government programs over the years. No one remembers anymore. I remember. Now I remember. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah's mind raced through the implications, her university position, her research grants, her family's reputation. All of it could disappear with a few strategic phone calls. In the current academic climate, even unfounded accusations could destroy a career. "You're threatening my unborn child." She opened the door to find him already packing their few belongings into a worn duffel bag. His military training was evident in his efficient movements, every action purposeful and economical. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." Marcus didn't look up from his packing. Harrison's old school, stick and carrot with emphasis on the stick, but he's also desperate, which makes him dangerous. "He wants to meet tomorrow night." "Of course he does. Controlled environment, home field advantage, probably backup he can call if negotiations go sideways." Marcus finally looked at her, his expression grim. "The question is whether you're willing to walk into that room." Sarah pressed both hands against her belly, feeling her daughter's movements growing stronger each day. Somewhere in those small kicks and turns lay the future of the Chen family legacy, either its redemption or its final destruction. "I don't think I have a choice." The manila folders scattered across Sarah's kitchen table like fallen leaves, each one containing fragments of a truth she wasn't sure she wanted to piece together. Her laptop screen glowed in the pre-dawn darkness, displaying digitized copies of the documents she'd photographed in the cave before Marcus's men had arrived. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago, but she couldn't bring herself to move away from the evidence. Her grandfather's signature appeared on document after document, authorizing excavations that had never been publicly reported. Project Lazarus, they called it. The name sent chills down her spine every time she read it. According to the files, Harold Chen had been the lead archaeologist on a classified government operation that had lasted from 1952 to 1967, spanning multiple dig sites across the southwest. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly as she read about the artifacts they'd discovered. Ancient symbols that predated known Native American cultures by thousands of years. Metallurgy that shouldn't have existed in pre-Columbian America. Most disturbing of all, repeated references to biological specimens that had been shipped to an undisclosed facility for analysis. The baby kicked as if responding to her distress. She whispered an apology and tried to calm her racing heart. Dr. Martinez had warned her about stress. But how could she remain calm when everything she'd believed about her family was crumbling? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Stop digging or your baby pays the price." Sarah's blood turned to ice. They knew where she lived. They knew about the pregnancy. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers and called Detective Rivera. "Chen? It's 4 a.m. They threatened my baby." Her voice cracked. "I need protection. Slow down. Who threatened you?" She read him the text, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Rivera's tone shifted immediately from sleepy irritation to sharp alertness. "Pack a bag. I'm sending a unit to pick you up. Don't go anywhere alone." After Rivera hung up, Sarah stared at the documents spread before her. She couldn't take them with her, but she couldn't leave them here either. Working quickly, she photographed every page again, uploading them to a secure cloud server her tech-savvy colleague at the university had set up for sensitive research. Rivera's expression was grim as she opened the door. "We need to talk. My investigation into Marcus Webb hit a wall yesterday. Phone calls were made. Pressure was applied. I'm being told to back off." "So you're abandoning this?" "I'm being reassigned to a drug case in the valley. Effective immediately." Rivera's jaw tightened. "But that doesn't mean I'm giving up. It means we're on our own." "Rivera," she said quietly, "what if my grandfather found proof that would rewrite American history? What if Project Lazarus discovered something that contradicts everything we've been taught about this continent's past?" The detective glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Like what?" Sarah thought about the metallurgy reports, the biological specimens, the symbols that predated known cultures. What if we weren't the first advanced civilization here? What if someone else was here, thousands of years before Columbus, before the land bridge, before everything we think we know about human migration to North America? Rivera was quiet for a long moment. "That would be worth killing for," he finally said. "That would change everything." Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the familiar handwriting in her grandfather's journal. The cramped basement of the university library felt suffocating, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the yellowed pages. 3 days had passed since her meeting with Marcus Chen, and the weight of his revelations pressed against her chest like a physical force. September 15th, 1952. The government officials arrived today. They want everything from the Colorado site destroyed, every photograph, every artifact, every sample. They claim it's a matter of national security, but I know better. What we found challenges everything we thought we knew about pre-Columbian contact. Sarah's breath caught. The Colorado site, the same location mentioned in the documents from the cave. Her grandfather had been there, had seen whatever they were trying to hide. She flipped through more pages, her heart racing despite her efforts to remain calm for the baby's sake. They offered money, substantial money, enough to fund my research for decades. All I have to do is forget what I saw, sign their papers, and never speak of it again. Margaret thinks I should take it. She's pregnant with David, and the security would be welcome. But how can I betray everything I believe in? David, her father. Sarah pressed her palm against her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. History repeating itself. Pregnant wives, impossible choices, family legacies built on buried truths. The library's ancient heating system groaned overhead as she continued reading. Each entry revealed more pieces of the puzzle. Her grandfather hadn't just stumbled upon evidence of early European contact with Native Americans. He discovered proof of systematic government cover-ups, of archaeological sites destroyed, of evidence suppressed to maintain official historical narratives. October 3rd, 1952. I've made my decision. I took their money, but I kept copies of everything, hidden them where no one will think to look. If the truth ever needs to come out, future generations will have what they need. I pray David will never have to face this choice. But David had faced it, hadn't he? The timing of her father's career shift, his sudden move away from fieldwork into university administration, it all made sense now. Somewhere along the line, he'd been contacted, pressured, bought off just like his father before him. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging or your baby won't see its first birthday. Ice flooded her veins. She looked around the empty basement, suddenly aware of every shadow, every sound. The security camera in the corner blinked red, its lens trained on her table. Had someone been watching her research? How did they even know she was here? She photographed the remaining journal pages quickly, her movements sharp with adrenaline. The baby kicked, responding to her elevated heart rate, and she forced herself to breathe slowly. Getting panicked wouldn't help either of them. As she packed the journal away, footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Heavy, deliberate steps that seemed to pause at the basement door. Sarah slipped the journal into her bag and moved toward the back exit, the one that led through the archive's storage room. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory from childhood visits. Every building has its secrets, little one. Always know where the hidden doors are. The storage room smelled of dust and old paper, shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with decades of academic detritus. Sarah navigated by the glow of her phone's flashlight, following a path she remembered from graduate school when she'd helped catalogue materials back here. Behind her, she heard the basement door open. Voices, at least two men, speaking in low tones. They were searching the area where she'd been sitting, their flashlight beams sweeping across the tables. The service exit was just ahead, a plain metal door that opened onto the loading dock behind the library. Sarah's hand was on the handle when her phone rang, the sound piercing the silence like an alarm. The voices stopped, then rapid footsteps heading her way. Sarah pushed through the door and found herself face to face with Detective Morrison. He stood in the shadow of a delivery truck, his expression grim in the pale morning light. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly, "we need to talk. Now." "How did you—" she began, but he held up a hand. "Your life is in danger, more than you know." He glanced toward the door she'd just exited. "Those men in there aren't just trying to scare you. Last night, Professor Williams was found dead in his office. They made it look like a heart attack, but I know better." Williams, the elderly archaeologist who'd been her grandfather's research partner decades ago, one of the few people still alive who might remember the Colorado expedition. "Get in," Morrison said, opening the passenger door of an unmarked sedan. "There's something you need to see, and we don't have much time." Sarah hesitated, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. Trust the detective or trust the men hunting her through the library. Neither option felt safe, but at least Morrison wasn't pointing a gun at her. The rain hammered against the motel room window as Sarah spread the cave photographs across the narrow desk. Her hands trembled as she arranged them in chronological order, each image revealing another piece of the horrifying puzzle. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance across the evidence of her family's darkest secrets. Marcus paced behind her, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in hushed tones to his contact at the Times. Sarah caught fragments of his conversation: national security implications, need verification, source protection paramount. The baby kicked sharply against her ribs, as if sensing her mounting anxiety. "They want to meet," Marcus said, ending the call. "Tomorrow night, a secure location outside the city." Sarah nodded, but her attention remained fixed on a particular photograph. It showed her grandfather, handwriting on what appeared to be a shipping manifest, dated 3 months before the supposed archaeological discovery that had made him famous. The items listed matched exactly what she'd found in the cave: artifacts that should have been unknown to the Western world until decades later. Sarah Marcus's voice cut through her concentration. "You need to see this." He was holding his laptop, the screen displaying a news article from that morning's Washington Herald. The headline made her blood freeze. Prominent archaeologist Dr. Sarah Chen reported missing after hiking accident. "Missing?" Sarah's voice cracked. "But I called my department yesterday. I told them I was taking emergency leave." "Look at the source." Marcus pointed to a quote attributed to her department chair, Professor Reynolds. "He claims you never contacted him. Says your family reported you missing when you failed to return from your research trip." Sarah's mind raced. She had spoken to Reynolds personally, explained that she needed time off due to pregnancy complications. Either he was lying or someone had gotten to him. The baby moved restlessly as her stress levels spiked. "There's more," Marcus continued, scrolling down. "Your father's foundation is offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to your safe return. They're painting you as a confused, possibly unstable pregnant woman who wandered off into the wilderness." The calculated cruelty of it struck her like a physical blow. They were using her pregnancy against her, portraying her as mentally fragile, unreliable. Any evidence she might present would be dismissed as the delusions of a disturbed, expectant mother. "They're smart," she whispered. "Discredit the messenger, and you don't have to worry about the message." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Come home, sweetheart. We can work this out. Think of the baby. Dad." Sarah showed Marcus the screen. "How did he get this number? I bought this phone yesterday with cash. They're tracking us somehow." Marcus immediately began shutting down his laptop. "We need to move, now." As they hastily packed their few belongings, Sarah's mind churned through their options. Every move seemed to tighten the noose around them. Her family's influence reached deep into academic circles, government agencies, media outlets. The very institutions that should have protected the truth were compromised. Another text arrived. "The longer you run, the worse this gets. You're not thinking clearly. Pregnancy hormones can affect judgment. Come home before you hurt yourself and the baby." The manipulation was so blatant it made her nauseous. They were weaponizing societal prejudices about pregnant women, using her condition to undermine her credibility while simultaneously threatening her child. "Marcus, what if we're wrong about tomorrow night? What if your contact isn't who you think they are?" He paused in his packing, meeting her eyes. "Then we're walking into a trap. But what choice do we have? If we keep running, they'll eventually corner us. At least this way, we might get the truth out there first." Sarah pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the baby's movements slow, as if responding to her attempt to calm herself. "I used to think the hardest choice would be between exposing the truth and protecting my child. But they're not separate anymore. If I don't expose this, what kind of world am I bringing my baby into? One where people like my father can bury the truth whenever it threatens their power." Thunder crashed outside, and the lights flickered ominously. In that moment of darkness, Sarah made her decision. "We go to the meeting, but we don't go unprepared." She pulled out her phone and began typing. "If something happens to us, I want multiple copies of everything in different hands, insurance policies." As she sent encrypted files to 3 separate email accounts she'd created under false names, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. For the first time since entering that cave, she wasn't just reacting to her family's moves, she was making her own. The baby kicked again, gentler this time, and Sarah whispered to her unborn child, "I promise you, little one, you're going to be born into a world where the truth matters, whatever it costs." The manila envelope felt heavier than it should have as Sarah clutched it against her chest, her heart hammering so violently she worried it might harm the baby. The safe house Marcus had brought her to was a nondescript apartment above a Chinese restaurant, the smell of garlic and soy sauce masking the mustiness of disuse. Through the grimy window she could see pedestrians hurrying past in the evening rain, oblivious to the conspiracy unraveling just floors above their heads. Marcus paced the small living room like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in hushed, urgent tones to someone on the other end. Sarah couldn't make out the words, but his body language screamed danger. When he finally hung up, his face was grim. "We have maybe 2 hours before they track us here," he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Thompson's put out an APB. They're saying you're armed and dangerous, possibly suffering from pregnancy-induced psychosis." Sarah's laugh came out as a bitter bark. "Psychosis? They're really going all out, aren't they?" "It gets worse." Marcus sat heavily in the chair across from her. "Your mother's been taken into protective custody. Official story is that she's being kept safe from her unstable daughter. Unofficial story is that she's being held as leverage." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah gripped the arm of her chair, fighting a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness. "They have my mother? I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have seen this coming." She stared at the envelope in her lap, its contents now feeling like a death sentence rather than salvation. Inside were photocopies of the documents she'd found in the cave, along with additional materials Marcus had somehow procured. Bank records, communication logs, photographs that painted a picture of corruption spanning 4 decades. The Whitmore Foundation, her grandfather's crowning achievement, had been built on blood money. Defense contracts awarded in exchange for buried archaeological evidence of government war crimes. Sites destroyed, artifacts disappeared, entire cultures' histories erased to protect political careers and military reputations. Her family's name graced museums and universities across the country, all funded by systematic cover-ups of atrocities that would have toppled administrations. "There's something else you need to see," Marcus said quietly. He pulled out his laptop and opened a video file. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 days ago. Sarah's grandfather appeared on screen, looking frail but alert in what appeared to be a hospital room. His voice, once commanding and warm, was now a whispered rasp. "If you're watching this, Sarah, then they've already moved against you." His eyes, still sharp despite his age, seemed to look directly at her through the screen. "I know about the cave. I've known for 30 years. I was young when it started," the recording continued, "ambitious. They offered me funding for my research in exchange for small favors, overlooking certain findings, mislabeling artifacts, redirecting excavations away from sensitive areas. I told myself it was for the greater good, that science would benefit in the long run." His voice cracked. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong." The old man on the screen seemed to age further as he spoke, the weight of decades pressing down on him. "By the time I understood the full scope of what I'd become part of, I was in too deep. They had enough on me to destroy everything, the foundation, the family name, your future. So I played along, documented everything, and waited for the right moment to make it right." Marcus paused the video. He's been feeding information to a journalist for months, someone he trusted, but the journalist died in a car accident 2 weeks ago, the same day your grandfather had his stroke. "You think they—" "I think your grandfather's stroke was very convenient timing." Marcus restarted the video. "The evidence is all there. In the place where it began," her grandfather's image continued. "The cave you found is just the tip of the iceberg. There are documents, recordings, proof of everything, but Sarah, you need to understand. Exposing this will destroy our family. Everything we built, everything we've given to the world of archaeology will be tainted. Your child will grow up in the shadow of this scandal." The recording flickered, and her grandfather leaned closer to the camera. "But if you don't expose it, they'll never let you live. They can't risk you talking. The choice is yours, but know that whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. You have more integrity than I ever did." Sarah sat in stunned silence, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly. The baby kicked, a strong flutter that reminded her of what was at stake. Not just her life, not just her mother's, but the future she wanted to build for her child. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Marcus closed the laptop. "We need to move, now." Sarah stood, tucking the envelope inside her jacket. The weight of 3 generations of secrets pressed against her ribs, and she knew that whatever choice she made in the next few hours would echo through history. The morning rain drummed against the cabin windows as Sarah paced the small living room, her phone pressed to her ear. Dr. Martinez's voice crackled through the poor reception. Each word weighted with urgency. "The samples you sent are extraordinary, Sarah. The isotope signatures don't match anything in our database. We're talking about elements that shouldn't exist in nature, at least not in these concentrations." His pause stretched uncomfortably. "Where exactly did you find these?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby had been restless all night. "I can't tell you that yet, Miguel, but I need to know, could these materials be weaponized?" The silence on the other end told her everything. When Martinez finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a whisper. "Sarah, you need to be very careful. I've only seen readings like this once before, in classified documents from the Manhattan Project. If these samples are connected to what I think they might be, the line went dead." Sarah stared at the phone, her heart racing. Outside, a car engine rumbled to life. Odd, since the nearest neighbor was miles away. She moved to the window and peered through the curtain. A black sedan sat at the end of the dirt road, its occupants obscured by tinted windows. Her laptop chimed with an incoming video call. The screen showed an unknown number, but something compelled her to answer. A woman's face appeared, elderly, with sharp blue eyes and silver hair pulled back severely. "Dr. Sarah Chen, I believe we need to talk." Sarah's blood turned cold. She recognized the face from old newspaper clippings, though the woman had aged decades since those photos. "Victoria Ashford." "Indeed. I see you've been busy playing in caves where you don't belong." Victoria's smile held no warmth. "That was my associate's car you spotted. Don't worry, they're just insurance. This conversation can remain civilized if you're reasonable." "Reasonable about what? Covering up your family's war crimes?" Victoria's laugh was brittle. "War crimes? Child, you have no idea what my grandfather prevented, what we're still preventing." She leaned closer to her camera. "Those materials you found? They're not weapons, they're a cure." The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. A cure for what? For the greatest threat humanity has ever faced. In 1943, our scientists discovered something in those mountains, a pathogen unlike anything on Earth. Ancient, dormant, but awakening. Your grandfather wasn't helping build weapons, dear. He was helping build a shield. Sarah's mind reeled. The journal entries, her grandfather's guilt-ridden words, suddenly they took on a different meaning. "You're lying." "Am I? Haven't you wondered why that cave has been sealed for so long? Why we've maintained such careful watch over that region?" Victoria's eyes glittered. "The pathogen is still there, Sarah, still growing. And every time someone disturbs that cave system, we risk unleashing something that could end our species." The baby kicked hard, and Sarah gasped, doubling over slightly. Victoria's expression softened marginally. "You're what, 6 months along? 7? That child deserves a world to grow up in." Victoria's voice took on an almost grandmother quality. "Work with us, Sarah. Help us maintain the containment. Your grandfather would have wanted that. My grandfather died consumed with guilt over what he'd done. Because he was never told the full truth. We've learned since then that transparency, at least with key family members, is essential." Victoria glanced at something off-screen. "You have a choice to make, Dr. Chen. You can continue down this path of exposure and potentially doom millions, or you can join a legacy that's been protecting humanity for 80 years. The baby moved again, more gently this time, as if responding to Sarah's elevated stress. She thought of Tom, still unconscious in the hospital, and of the fragments she'd hidden in various locations as insurance. Time is a luxury we don't have. Satellite imagery shows unusual thermal readings from that mountain. Something is stirring down there, possibly triggered by your recent excavation." Victoria's face hardened. 12 hours, Dr. Chen. Decide whether you're going to be part of the solution or become another problem we have to solve." The screen went black. Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the weight of impossible choices. Through the window, the black sedan remained motionless, its occupants patient as predators. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hospital called. "Your husband is awake. He's asking for you." The message felt like both salvation and trap. The safe house felt more like a prison with each passing hour. Sarah paced the cramped living room, her hand resting protectively on her belly as the baby kicked restlessly. Through the grimy windows, she could see Agent Morrison's car parked across the street, a constant reminder of how precarious their situation had become. Marcus emerged from the bedroom where he'd been making encrypted phone calls for the past 2 hours. His face was grim, the lines around his eyes deeper than she'd ever seen them. "The university board met this morning," he said quietly. "They're launching a formal investigation into the authenticity of all artifacts associated with the Harrison collection. Your father's entire life's work is being called into question." Sarah's chest tightened. "Because of what we found in the cave?" "Because someone leaked selective information about what we found. They're painting your father as either complicit in the cover-up or incompetent enough to have missed obvious fabrications." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "The press is having a field day." "Archaeological dynasty built on lies," was this morning's headline. The baby gave another sharp kick, as if sensing her distress. Sarah sank into the worn armchair, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. Every path forward seemed to lead to destruction. Either her family's legacy would be obliterated, or innocent people would die to keep the conspiracy buried. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. You need to see this. A friend." Sarah hesitated, then opened her laptop. A new message waited with no sender name and a single attachment. The video file loaded slowly, revealing grainy footage from what appeared to be a security camera. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 days ago. On screen, a figure she recognized as Director Walsh stood in what looked like a government office, speaking to someone off camera. The audio was muffled but audible enough to make out key phrases. "Contains the Harrison girl. Disposal of evidence must be permanent. National security cannot be compromised by archaeological sentiment." Marcus leaned over her shoulder, his breathing sharp. "They're not just trying to discredit your father, they're planning to eliminate the evidence entirely, and us along with it," Sarah whispered. The video continued, showing Walsh pulling out a thick manila folder. He spread several photographs across the desk, images of the cave, the documents they'd found, and stomach-churningly, surveillance photos of Sarah and Marcus taken over the past few days. Sarah's hand flew to her throat. The casual way he discussed their murders, as if they were merely items on a checklist, made her blood run cold. Marcus was already moving, grabbing their emergency bag from the closet. "We need to leave, now." "Wait." Sarah paused the video and studied the office visible behind Walsh. "I recognize this room. It's in the federal building downtown. My father took me there once when I was a child. He was consulting on some Native American artifact repatriation case." "Sarah, we don't have time for—" "Don't you see? Whoever sent this video has access to government surveillance systems. They're showing us exactly where these people operate from, when they meet, what they're planning." Her mind raced as the implications became clear. "This isn't just a warning, it's an invitation. I'm considering saving our child's future." Her voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. "If we run, we'll always be running. They'll hunt us down eventually, and our baby will grow up without ever knowing the truth about their grandfather, about their heritage, about why their parents died." He followed her gaze and cursed under his breath. "Back door. Now." As they gathered their essentials and prepared to flee once again, Sarah made a decision that terrified and empowered her in equal measure. Tomorrow night, one way or another, this would end. She would either expose the truth that had cost so many lives, or she would die trying. The baby kicked again, strong and determined, as if agreeing with her choice. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town felt like stepping into a tomb. Sarah's footsteps echoed against concrete walls as she followed Marcus deeper into the shadows, her hand instinctively protecting her belly. The baby had been restless all day, as if sensing the danger that surrounded them. "The files are in the back office," Marcus whispered, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "My contact from the State Department managed to smuggle them out before the cleanup crew arrived." Sarah's breath came in short bursts. 3 days had passed since her confrontation with Director Hayes, and the world felt like it was closing in around her. The cave site had been cordoned off, declared a geological hazard. Her father's colleagues had stopped returning her calls. Even her mother seemed different during their brief, stilted conversations. "How do I know this isn't another trap?" she asked, though she continued following him. At this point, she had few choices left. Marcus stopped and turned to face her, his expression grim in the harsh light. "Because I've burned every bridge I had to get these documents. Look at me, Sarah. Really look." She did. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. A fresh bruise colored his left cheek. "They came to my apartment yesterday," he continued. "Told me to convince you to disappear quietly. When I refused—" He gestured to his face. "Let's just say they weren't pleased with my lack of cooperation." They reached a makeshift office area where boxes of files sat illuminated by battery-powered lanterns. Sarah's heart hammered as she recognized some of the letterheads. Her father's university, the National Science Foundation, even documents bearing the presidential seal. "Start with this one," Marcus said, handing her a manila folder marked with her father's name. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. The first document was a memorandum dated 30 years ago, signed by young Director Hayes. Her eyes scanned the text, each word hitting her like a physical blow. Project Blackstone. Systematic elimination of archaeological evidence. Maintaining strategic advantage. She looked up at Marcus. "My father was working for them. He wasn't just covering up what happened to those indigenous people, he was actively participating in it." "Keep reading," Marcus urged gently. The next document made her stomach lurch. It was a field report in her father's handwriting, clinical and detached, describing the removal of remains and artifacts from multiple sites across the region. Sites that were then handed over to mining companies, defense contractors, corporations with ties to the same shadow network that now hunted her. "He helped them erase entire civilizations," she whispered. "All these years, I thought he was this noble scholar, this champion of historical truth, but he was a tool," Marcus finished. "They used his reputation, his academic standing, to legitimize what they were doing. And when he finally grew a conscience, where are these records? That's what they've been trying to figure out. But I think you already know." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering her father's final words to her in the hospital. She'd thought he was delirious from the medication when he kept talking about the gift in the stone, about how she would know where to look when the time came. "The cave," she said. "There's something else in that cave, something he hid there, something worth killing for," Marcus agreed. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before Sarah could answer, the sound of vehicles approaching cut through the night air. Marcus immediately killed the lanterns, plunging them into darkness. "Back exit," he hissed, grabbing her hand. "Now." But as they ran toward the rear of the warehouse, flashlight beams began cutting through the windows from multiple directions. They were surrounded. Sarah's mind raced as she clutched the files to her chest. The evidence she held could bring down dozens of powerful people, expose decades of crimes, but it could also ensure that her child would never know safety. The warehouse doors exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the encrypted files on her laptop screen. The hotel room felt suffocating despite the air conditioning running at full blast. Marcus had been gone for 3 hours now, and each minute that passed without word from him sent another spike of anxiety through her chest. The baby kicked again, a sharp reminder of what was at stake. She placed her palm against her belly, trying to find some semblance of calm in the movement. Everything depended on the next few hours, and the weight of that knowledge was almost unbearable. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number package delivered. "Check your email." Sarah's heart hammered as she opened her inbox. There it was, a message from an encrypted account with a single attachment. The file was massive, nearly 2 gigabytes of compressed data. As it downloaded, she caught her reflection in the dark window. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. When had she started looking like a ghost? The download completed with a soft chime. Sarah double-clicked the file, and her screen filled with documents she'd never seen before. Personnel records, financial statements, classified communications, all bearing the seal of the Department of Archaeological Research. Her father's department. The first document made her stomach lurch. It was a requisition order dated 3 months before her birth, requesting the transfer of sensitive, cultural artifacts to an undisclosed location. Her father's signature was clear at the bottom, authorizing the removal of items from what she now recognized as the cave she'd discovered. But that was impossible. The cave had been untouched when she'd found it. Every artifact had been exactly where ancient hands had placed them, unless... Sarah's blood ran cold. The next document confirmed her worst fear. The artifacts in the cave weren't the originals, they were meticulously crafted replicas, placed there after the genuine items had been sold to private collectors through a network of shell companies. The conspiracy wasn't about hiding indigenous history, it was about stealing it. More files revealed the scope of the operation. Dozens of sites across the Southwest had been systematically looted over the past 40 years. Priceless artifacts, some dating back millennia, had been replaced with fakes while the originals disappeared into private collections around the world. The profits, laundered through various government accounts, had funded black operations that Congress never saw. Her father hadn't just participated in the conspiracy. According to the financial records, he'd been one of its architects. Sarah's phone rang, making her jump. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "We have a problem." His voice was tight with tension. "Senator Morrison isn't just involved, he's been the political cover for the entire operation. And Sarah, he knows about you. He knows about the cave. I've been monitoring communications at the DOJ. There's a federal warrant being prepared for your arrest. They're going to charge you with theft of government property and destruction of archaeological sites. The paperwork should be finalized within the hour." Sarah gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles went white. "But I didn't steal anything. I documented everything exactly as I found it." "They're saying you removed artifacts from the original site before reporting it. They have photographs that supposedly show the cave partially emptied." Marcus paused. "Sarah, the photos are fake, but they're convincing. Someone with serious resources put this together." The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing her distress. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think through the panic clouding her mind. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before they issue the warrant. After that, every law enforcement agency in the state will be looking for you." His voice softened. "Sarah, you need to run. Take the evidence and disappear until we can figure out how to expose this thing properly." "I can't run. I'm 8 months pregnant, Marcus. Where exactly am I supposed to go?" "I'm working on that. But right now, you need to get out of that hotel. They'll start with known locations, and your credit card transaction will lead them right to you." Sarah was already moving, shoving her laptop and research materials into her bag. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life fall apart. "What about you? Are you safe?" "For now. But, Sarah, there's something else. I found a communication between Morrison and someone at the DOD. They're not just planning to arrest you, they're planning to make sure you can't testify, ever." The implication hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto the bed, one hand clutching her belly protectively. "They're going to kill me." "Not if I can help it. Get to the parking garage. Take the stairs, not the elevator. I'll call you in 20 minutes with instructions." "Marcus." 20 minutes, Sarah. And whatever happens, don't trust anyone else. Not the local police, not the FBI, not anyone claiming they want to help. The conspiracy goes deeper than we ever imagined." The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of her family's betrayal and the growing certainty that her unborn child might never see the world outside her womb. The abandoned warehouse loomed before Sarah like a monument to decay, its broken windows reflecting the orange glow of the setting sun. Her father's car was already there, parked beside a black sedan she didn't recognize. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to drive away and never look back, but the weight of the flash drive in her pocket anchored her to this moment. The warehouse door stood slightly ajar. Sarah slipped inside, the musty air thick with the smell of rust and abandonment. Footsteps echoed from somewhere deep within the building, accompanied by voices she couldn't quite make out. She followed the sound, her sneakers silent on the concrete floor. Light spilled from an office at the far end of the warehouse. As she approached, the voices became clearer. Her father's familiar baritone mixed with two others she didn't recognize, their conversation tense and urgent. "The situation is contained," one of the strangers was saying, "but we need to know what else she might have found." "I've told you everything," her father replied, his voice strained. "Sarah found the cave by accident. She doesn't understand the implications of what she saw." Sarah pressed herself against the wall beside the doorway, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the gap she could see her father seated at a metal desk, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Two men in dark suits stood opposite him, their backs to the door. "Dr. Chen, you assured us this site was secure," the second man said, his tone carrying an unmistakable threat. "Your family's involvement in this project spans 3 generations. Surely you understand what's at stake." "Of course I understand," her father snapped. "My father died protecting these secrets. I've spent my entire career making sure they stayed buried." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Grandfather Chen had died in a climbing accident when she was 12, or so she'd been told. The pieces of a horrible puzzle began clicking into place. The radioactive testing, the human subjects, the cover-up. "If any of this comes to light, it won't just destroy careers," the first man continued. "National security hangs in the balance. The families of those test subjects, the international implications." "I know what's at stake," her father interrupted. "But Sarah is my daughter. I won't let you hurt her." "Then convince her to stay quiet, permanently." The baby kicked hard against Sarah's ribs, as if responding to her spike of adrenaline. She bit back a gasp, pressing her hand firmly against the movement. "She's pregnant," her father said quietly. "She's vulnerable right now, emotional. If we approach this carefully—" "We're past the point of careful, Doctor. Your daughter has physical evidence. Our sources tell us she's been asking questions, making inquiries. How long before she connects the dots?" Sarah's mind raced. The cave, the radiation readings, the human remains. It wasn't just an accident or a forgotten tragedy. It was a deliberate government experiment, covered up for decades with her family's help. Her grandfather hadn't died in a climbing accident. He'd been silenced. "There has to be another way," her father pleaded. "Sarah's a good person. She'll understand if we explain." "You're talking about murder," her father said, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, a text message. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the echoing warehouse. She fumbled to silence it, but it was too late. The conversation in the office stopped abruptly. "What was that?" one of the men hissed. Footsteps moved toward the door. Sarah's paralysis broke, and she turned to run, but her foot caught on a piece of debris. She stumbled, catching herself against a support beam as pain shot through her ankle. "Sarah?" her father's voice called out, filled with horror and recognition. "Sarah, is that you?" She looked back to see him standing in the doorway, his face pale and stricken. Behind him, the 2 men in suits emerged, their expressions cold and calculating. "Well," the first man said, pulling something from inside his jacket, "I suppose that settles the question of how to proceed." The metallic click of a gun's safety being released echoed through the empty warehouse. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to protect her belly as she realized there was nowhere left to run. The warehouse smelled of rust and decay, its cavernous space illuminated only by shafts of moonlight streaming through broken skylights. Sarah pressed herself against a concrete pillar, one hand protectively cradling her belly while the other gripped the encrypted drive containing everything that could bring down Senator Morrison and his network of conspirators. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen, exit compromised. Morrison's people surrounding building, find another way out. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress, and she whispered softly, "I know, little one. Mommy's scared too." Footsteps echoed from the main entrance, followed by the low murmur of voices coordinating a search pattern. She counted at least 4 distinct speakers, their words carrying across the empty space with crystalline clarity. "She's in here somewhere," came Morrison's familiar voice, cold and authoritative. "The archaeologist has caused enough trouble. Find her, retrieve the evidence, and clean this up permanently." Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of her grandfather's journal hidden in the cave, of the photographs documenting decades of archaeological theft and cover-ups, of the indigenous burial sites desecrated in the name of political expediency. Everything pointed back to Morrison's early career as a junior senator on the Natural Resources Committee, when he'd systematically approved developments that destroyed irreplaceable historical sites. A beam of light swept dangerously close to her position. She held her breath, pressing deeper into the shadows, when her phone vibrated again. This time it was Marcus. "Emergency exit on North Wall. Service tunnel leads to storm drain. I'm waiting with car at Maple Street Bridge." Relief flooded through her, but reaching the North Wall meant crossing 30 yards of open space under those broken skylights. The searchers were methodical, working in a grid pattern that would reach her hiding spot within minutes. "Contact the others," Morrison's voice carried across the warehouse. "If she's transmitted anything to news outlets or federal agencies, we need to know immediately. The containment protocol goes into effect tonight." Sarah realized with growing horror that this conspiracy reached far beyond archaeological cover-ups. Morrison's people had contingency plans, networks of contacts ready to suppress information and eliminate threats. How many others had discovered pieces of this puzzle over the years? How many had simply disappeared? The baby kicked again, more insistently this time, and Sarah made her decision. She couldn't protect her child by hiding in shadows while Morrison's network continued operating. The evidence on this drive represented justice for countless violated sacred sites and the indigenous communities whose heritage had been systematically erased. She removed her shoes to move more quietly, then began a careful circuit toward the North Wall, using support pillars and abandoned machinery as cover. Each step felt precarious, her altered center of gravity making stealth more challenging than ever before. "Movement, Sector 4, someone called out, and instantly flashlight beams converged on her approximate location. Sarah abandoned stealth for speed, breaking into an awkward run toward the emergency exit Marcus had indicated. Behind her, shouts erupted as her pursuers gave chase. "There, don't let her reach that exit." The service door appeared ahead, its red paint faded and rusted, but the handle still functional. Sarah threw her weight against it just as footsteps pounded across the concrete behind her. The tunnel beyond was narrow and dark, barely wide enough for her shoulders, but she squeezed inside as hands grasped at the closing door. The tunnel angled downward, following the building's foundation toward the storm drainage system. Sarah crawled forward on hands and knees, the encrypted drive secured in her jacket pocket, her breathing echoing in the confined space. "She's in the service tunnel," Morrison's voice carried through the door behind her. "There's only one way out. Radio our people at the storm drain." Sarah's blood ran cold. They knew exactly where this tunnel led, which meant Marcus might be walking into a trap. She needed to warn him, but the tunnel's metal walls blocked her phone signal completely. The passage seemed endless, her knees aching against concrete as she navigated by touch alone. The baby's movements had stilled, as if even her unborn child understood the gravity of their situation. Finally, she saw a faint light ahead and heard the distant sound of running water. The tunnel opened into a larger storm drain, moonlight filtering down through street grates above. Sarah emerged into the circular concrete pipe, her clothes torn and dirty, but still clutching the evidence that could expose everything. Her phone immediately buzzed with missed calls and messages. The latest from Marcus read, "Plans changed. Morrison's people at Bridge. Meet me at the university instead. Professor Williams has something you need to see." Sarah looked up at the storm grates above, calculating distances and directions. The university lay 6 blocks east, but getting there meant surfacing into streets that Morrison's people were undoubtedly watching. She began moving through the storm system, following the flow of water toward campus, knowing that everything would be decided in the next few hours. Sarah stood at the podium, her hand resting protectively over her rounded belly as camera flashes illuminated the packed auditorium. The weight of the thumb drive in her pocket felt heavier than the child she carried. Behind her, enlarged photographs of the cave's interior displayed the evidence that would shatter everything her family had built. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "What you're about to see will fundamentally change our understanding of American history and the lengths some have gone to suppress the truth." In the front row, she spotted Agent Morrison, his face a mask of professional neutrality. 3 seats away sat her father, his weathered hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair, his eyes pleading with her to reconsider. The betrayal in his expression cut deeper than any physical wound. The first slide appeared on the screen behind her, the cave entrance, concealed for decades beneath carefully placed rockfall. "6 weeks ago, during what should have been a routine hike, I discovered something that was never meant to be found." Her voice carried across the silent room as she clicked to the next image. Documents dating back to 1953, detailing Operation Windfall, a systematic program to relocate and eliminate Native American communities to facilitate uranium mining on sacred lands. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Sarah's throat tightened as she continued. These weren't random acts of violence. They were coordinated efforts involving federal agents, military personnel, and prominent archaeological institutions. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle, "including the Blackwood Institute, founded by my grandfather." The baby shifted inside her, and Sarah placed both hands on her belly, drawing strength from the life growing within her. The evidence shows that Henry Blackwood knowingly participated in the destruction of archaeological sites to cover up mass graves. Artifacts that should have been preserved were destroyed. Entire cultures were erased from the historical record. Another slide. Her grandfather's signature on documents authorizing the removal of impediments to national security interests. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "The man I was raised to revere as a champion of historical preservation was, in fact, complicit in its destruction." In the audience, she saw Professor Chen, her former mentor, tears streaming down his face. Beside him sat Maria Clearwater, the tribal elder who had first warned her about the cave's significance. Maria's knowing nod gave Sarah the courage to continue. The conspiracy extended far beyond one institution. Sarah pressed on, her voice growing stronger. "We have evidence of ongoing cover-up efforts, including the recent murders of Dr. James Patterson and tribal activist Robert Clearwater, both of whom had discovered pieces of this truth." Agent Morrison's expression didn't change, but she noticed his subtle shift, preparing to leave. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Some of those responsible for maintaining this silence are in this room today." The final slide appeared, a contemporary document detailing the systematic harassment of researchers who had come too close to the truth. Sarah looked directly at Morrison. Federal agents have been monitoring and intimidating anyone who might expose Operation Windfall using the same playbook developed 70 years ago. Hands shot up across the room as reporters erupted with questions. Sarah held up her hand for quiet. "I want to be clear about why I'm here today. 3 weeks ago, I was approached by federal agents who offered me a choice: remain silent and protect my family's legacy and my unborn child's future, or face the consequences of speaking out." She felt the baby kick, as if responding to her words. They threatened my pregnancy, suggesting that the stress of public scrutiny might prove dangerous. They offered financial security, prestigious positions, a comfortable life built on continued silence. Sarah's voice hardened. They made it clear that the same fate that befell Dr. Patterson could easily befall me. The room fell silent, except for the rapid clicking of camera shutters. Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew the thumb drive. This contains everything: documents, photographs, audio recordings of threats made against me and my family. I'm releasing it all to the media and the Department of Justice simultaneously. Her father had buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Sarah's heart broke for him, but she knew there was no other path forward. I'm here because I believe the children we bring into this world deserve truth, not comfortable lies. Because the victims of Operation Windfall deserve justice, not continued silence. She gestured to Maria Clearwater. Because the communities that were destroyed deserve to have their stories told, their ancestors honored properly. As security moved to escort Agent Morrison from the building, Sarah felt a strange sense of lightness, as if a weight she'd carried for months had finally been lifted. The baby seemed calmer too, no longer pressing urgently against her ribs. I will not raise my child on a foundation of blood and lies, she concluded, her hand again finding her belly. Whatever consequences come from today, they cannot be worse than living with this silence. As the room erupted in chaos, reporters shouting questions, officials making urgent phone calls, Sarah stepped down from the podium, finally free.